Sometimes the door you open by mistake is the one your heart was meant to find. The hallway smelled faintly of fresh paint and cardboard dust as Ethan Brooks shifted another box against his hip and tried not to drop the grocery bag hanging from his wrist. Apartment 3C was supposed to be a new beginning. Smaller than their old place, older too, with creaky floors and windows that rattled when the wind picked up, but it was affordable, and after 8 months of sleeping on his brother's pull-out couch, affordable felt a lot like hope. Behind him, 8-year-old Lily dragged a pink suitcase almost half her size. "Daddy," she said softly, her voice already tired from the move, "do you think Mom would have liked this place?" Ethan paused. The key in his hand suddenly felt heavier than metal. He forced a smile anyway. "I think she'd like that it has a kitchen big enough for pancakes." Lily gave a tiny grin. "And cinnamon ones. Especially cinnamon ones." He turned back, found the number on the door, and slid the key in with fingers that had fixed air conditioners in August heat and replaced broken vents during snowstorms, but somehow still shook when his daughter asked questions about the past. The lock clicked. Ethan pushed the door open. Warm light spilled across polished hardwood floors. Soft piano music drifted somewhere inside. The scent of vanilla and baked apples wrapped around him before he even took a step. He froze. This was not apartment 3C. A woman stood near the kitchen island holding a ceramic mug in both hands. She looked up slowly. Light from the window caught chestnut strands in her hair, and for one suspended second nobody moved. Ethan stepped back immediately. "Oh my God, I'm sorry." He nearly dropped the groceries. I opened the wrong door. "I'll go." Lily peeked around his side, eyes wide with embarrassment. The woman looked from Ethan to the little girl clutching the suitcase handle with both hands. Then something softened in her expression. She set the mug down. "It's okay," she said quietly. "Let me help." Ethan blinked. He had expected confusion, maybe annoyance, not kindness, especially not the kind that arrived so. Gently, it felt almost unfamiliar. "No, really," he said. "We're fine. I'm just exhausted and apparently losing my mind." Her smile was small but real. Moving day does that. Lily looked at the apple pie cooling near the counter. The woman noticed. "You like pie?" Lily nodded immediately, then looked guilty for doing it. The woman crouched slightly to her level. "I'm Claire." "I'm Lily." "And this nervous man carrying the whole apartment by himself." Lily smiled. "That's my dad." Claire looked back at Ethan. "Well then, your dad looks like he could use help carrying more than boxes." Ethan stood there under the warm kitchen light, still holding groceries, still halfway, turned toward the hallway. He had opened the wrong door. But for the first time in a long time, it didn't feel like he had stepped into the wrong place. The next hour passed with the strange gentleness that only happens when strangers forget to act like strangers. Claire carried 2 small boxes down the hallway while Ethan insisted he had everything under control, even though one of the handles on the grocery bag had already torn and a carton of eggs nearly slipped onto the floor. "I said I am fine," he muttered with an embarrassed smile. Claire lifted an eyebrow without slowing down. "You also walked into the wrong apartment and almost adopted my apple pie, so I am not sure I trust your judgment today." Lily giggled for the first time since the move began. The sound lingered in the hallway longer than it should have. Ethan noticed it immediately. His daughter had laughed less these past few years. Not because she forgot how, but because grief had a quiet way of teaching children to whisper around happiness. Apartment 3C turned out to be directly across from Claire's. The real door had a small brass number hanging slightly crooked and a welcome mat that read "Home is where the pancakes are." Lily stared at it. "Daddy," she whispered, "that is a sign." Ethan looked down. For a moment, he could almost hear his late wife laughing somewhere in memory, because she had loved silly things like that. The apartment itself was modest. Beige walls, old cabinets, a narrow kitchen with a window overlooking the parking lot. Afternoon sunlight rested on the counters in soft rectangles. It was not beautiful, but it was theirs. Claire set the last box near the couch. "You picked a good place," she said quietly. Ethan rubbed the back of his neck. It was the cheapest place that still had working heat. The honesty slipped out before he could stop it. Claire did not react with pity. She simply nodded as if dignity deserved silence instead of sympathy. Lily wandered toward the window. "You can see the maple tree," she announced proudly. Outside, one red maple stood near the sidewalk, leaves beginning to turn gold even though summer had only just started letting go. Claire smiled. That tree is famous. Ethan looked over. Famous. Every fall people take pictures under it. Lily gasped. Then we should too. Ethan swallowed quietly. There had not been many pictures lately. Life had become bills, extra shifts, school lunches, and nights spent fixing broken things because replacing them cost too much. Somewhere between surviving and providing, memories had become expensive. Claire walked toward the door. I should let you settle in. Lily suddenly turned. Wait. Claire paused. The little girl ran to a half-open box and pulled out a small paper star folded from yellow construction paper. My mom used to make these, she said softly. She said when someone helps you, you give them light back. Ethan lowered his eyes. Claire accepted the star with both hands like it was something priceless. Her expression changed for just a second. Softer. Sadder somehow. Thank you, Lily. The little girl smiled. Claire stepped into the hallway. Before leaving, she looked once more at Ethan. You know, she said gently, some places do not feel like home because they are perfect. Ethan met her eyes. The evening light rested quietly between them. Sometimes they become home because people are kind inside them. Then she walked away carrying nothing except a paper star and leaving behind a silence that felt unexpectedly warm. 3 days passed quietly, the kind of quiet that settles into a place before it decides whether it wants to become a home. Ethan left every morning before 7 carrying his tool bag and a thermos of coffee that never stayed hot long enough. Air conditioning units did not care if a man was tired. Broken systems still needed fixing whether the sun was blazing over rooftops or rain was tapping against service vans. Lily started school on Thursday. She wore a yellow sweater even though the weather still leaned warm because she said it made her feel brave. Ethan walked her to the bus stop beneath the maple tree. You ready? He asked. Lily squeezed the straps of her backpack. Maybe. Ethan smiled softly. That is usually enough. The bus had barely disappeared when he heard footsteps behind him. Claire stood there holding a paper bag and 2 cups. Coffee? She asked. Ethan blinked. You just carry extra coffee around? Only for exhausted fathers who pretend they are not exhausted. He laughed under his breath before taking it. Warm cinnamon drifted from the lid. You remembered. Claire looked confused. Remembered what? Ethan stared into the cup for a second. My wife used to put cinnamon in everything. Silence rested between them, gentle and careful. Claire did not fill it with apologies. She simply stood beside him under the maple tree while the morning wind moved through the leaves. That afternoon, Ethan came home later than expected. A compressor replacement outside town had stretched into sunset, and his shoulders felt like concrete. He opened the apartment door expecting darkness. Instead, he heard laughter. Real laughter. Bright and unguarded. He stopped. Lily sat at the kitchen table with colored pencils scattered everywhere. Claire was beside her trying very seriously to draw what looked like a cat and failing terribly. That is not a cat, Lily announced. Claire placed a hand over her heart. Excuse me. That is modern art. Lily burst into another laugh. Ethan had not heard that sound this often in years. The kitchen smelled faintly of tomato soup and grilled cheese. Warm light from the stove touched the cabinets. For one impossible second, the room felt like memory. Lily looked up first. Daddy. She jumped from the chair. Miss Claire helped me with homework and she cannot draw cats. Claire raised a finger. Allegedly. Ethan set down his keys slowly. You did not have to do this. Claire looked at him. I know. Simple words. No grand explanation. Just quiet kindness. Ethan moved toward the counter. Beside the soup pot sat something small. A wooden music box. Old oak. Tiny scratches along the lid. He froze instantly. Claire noticed. I found it in the hallway earlier, she said softly. It must have slipped from one of the moving boxes. Ethan picked it up carefully. Lily lowered her voice. That was Mom's. He opened the lid. The melody inside was faint now, worn with time, but still alive. Notes drifted through the apartment like dust catching sunlight. Claire became very still. Ethan swallowed hard. She used to play this every Sunday morning. Lily slipped her hand into his. Daddy, she whispered. The house sounds different now. Ethan looked around. Soup on the stove. Crayons on the table. Evening light resting across the floor. Claire standing quietly beside the window holding a crooked drawing of a cat. He understood what Lily meant. The apartment had not changed. The silence had. The rain arrived on Sunday afternoon with the soft patience of early fall, tapping against the windows and turning the parking lot silver. Ethan had promised Lily cinnamon pancakes after church, but the old skillet heated unevenly, and the first batch came out looking more like geography lessons than breakfast. Lily laughed anyway. This one looks like Texas. Ethan held up another misshapen pancake. Then this is probably Florida. A knock came at the door before he could attempt a third state. Claire stood outside holding a covered glass dish. Her sweater was dotted with tiny drops of rain. I made apple crumble, she said. Too much of it. Lily grinned immediately. That is impossible. Claire stepped inside while Ethan cleared space on the counter. The apartment smelled like maple syrup and cinnamon. The music box sat near the window now, its place somehow permanent. Rain hummed softly outside. For a while they stayed in that simple rhythm. Pancakes. Apple crumble. Lily telling dramatic stories about school. Claire pretending complete shock when informed that modern art cat. Drawings were now displayed on the refrigerator. Then Lily became unusually quiet. She sat cross-legged on the couch hugging a pillow while watching Ethan wash dishes. Daddy. Ethan glanced over. Yes, sweetheart. Her voice came smaller this time. If Mom was still here, would she like Miss Claire? The room stopped moving. Water continued running into the sink. Rain still touched the glass. But everything else became still. Ethan lowered the plate slowly. Claire looked down at her hands. Lily immediately regretted the question. I am sorry, she whispered. You do not have to answer. Ethan dried his hands with the kitchen towel and walked over. He sat beside his daughter. Your mom liked kind people, he said quietly. She believed kindness was how you recognized someone good. Lily looked toward Claire. Then I think she would like her. Claire kept her eyes lowered. Something flickered across her face so quickly Ethan almost missed it. Not embarrassment. Not happiness either. It looked more like someone hearing a song they had not allowed themselves to remember. Later that evening the rain slowed into mist. Claire stood near the doorway preparing to leave when Lily ran back from her room carrying a small photo frame. Wait. Claire turned. The frame held a picture of Ethan, Lily, and a woman with bright eyes and wind-blown hair standing beside a pumpkin patch years earlier. Lily touched the glass gently. That is my mom. Her name was Hannah. Claire accepted the frame carefully. Ethan watched from the kitchen. Hannah looked impossibly alive in that picture. Sunlight. Orange leaves. A future none of them knew would become memory. Claire smiled softly at the photograph. She looks like someone who loved deeply. Ethan felt something tighten quietly inside his chest. Most people spoke about loss with caution, like stepping around broken glass. Claire spoke as if grief deserved respect instead of fear. Lily leaned against Ethan's shoulder. Daddy still keeps one chair empty at dinner sometimes. Silence followed. Not awkward. Not heavy. Just honest. Claire looked toward the dining table where 3 chairs stood and one remained pushed slightly farther back than the others. Ethan had never noticed it before. Now he could not stop seeing it. Claire placed the photo frame back into Lily's hands. Her voice came almost like a whisper. Sometimes people leave spaces because love was real. Ethan met her eyes. Warm lamplight rested between them. For the first time since Hannah died, someone had looked at his grief and not asked him to move on. She had simply sat beside it. Monday arrived with clear skies and the kind of crisp air that hinted summer was slowly surrendering. Ethan left before sunrise for a repair call nearly 40 miles outside town. A family restaurant on Highway 18 had lost its cooling system overnight, and by 8 in the morning the kitchen already felt like an oven. He spent hours under metal panels and humming compressors while thinking about pancakes, rain, and a woman who somehow knew how to sit beside sorrow without trying to fix it. Back at the apartment complex, Lily came home from school carrying a paper leaf she had colored bright orange. Claire was waiting near the mailbox with grocery bags balanced against one hip. Miss Claire. Lily ran toward her. Claire smiled. How was school? I got a gold star in reading. That deserves celebration. Lily held up the paper leaf proudly. And this is for the maple tree because it is becoming famous again. They laughed together while walking toward the building. Then the sound of tires rolling slowly across gravel broke the moment. A black sport utility vehicle turned into the parking lot. It was too polished for the place. Too quiet. The driver stepped out first. Dark suit. Earpiece. He opened the rear door without speaking. Lily stopped walking. Claire became completely still. A woman in her 50s stepped out carrying a leather folder against her chest. Elegant coat. Perfect posture. The kind that belonged in glass offices and magazine interviews. not beside aging apartment buildings with cracked sidewalks. Miss Whitmore, the woman said calmly. Lily looked up. Claire did not answer immediately. Her face had gone pale in a way Ethan had never seen before. We have been trying to reach you for 3 days. Claire lowered her eyes. Not here. The board meeting has been moved up. Your father expects an answer. Lily blinked. Board meeting? The woman finally noticed the child beside her. Her expression softened for only a second. You cannot disappear forever. Claire inhaled slowly. I know. The woman handed her the folder. Gold letters were pressed across the front. Whitmore Hospitality Group. Lily did not understand what it meant, but she understood silence. And suddenly there was too much of it. The vehicle left 10 minutes later. Claire remained standing near the maple tree holding the folder like it weighed more than paper should. Ethan returned just before sunset. His shirt carried the smell of dust and machine oil. Lily met him at the door. Daddy. Her voice was small. Miss Claire has a secret. Ethan crouched immediately. What happened? Lily looked toward the window. Claire sat alone outside on the bench beneath the tree. Evening light touched her hair while the unopened folder rested beside her. A fancy car came. Lily lowered her voice even more. Someone called her Miss Whitmore. Ethan looked out again. The woman who had shared soup, carried boxes, and laughed at cat drawings suddenly seemed farther away than the few yards between them. He stepped outside quietly. Claire did not look up when he approached. Long day? She asked softly. Ethan sat beside her. Usually. Wind moved through the leaves overhead. Somewhere nearby a dog barked. Children rode bicycles past the parking lot. Ordinary sounds. Ordinary evening. But something had shifted. Ethan glanced toward the folder. You want to tell me what Whitmore means? Claire finally lifted her eyes. They looked tired now. Not from work. From running. It means, she said quietly, that the life you know about me is not the whole story. Claire did not speak again until the sky turned amber and the first porch lights flickered on around the complex. The folder remained unopened between them. Children had gone inside. The parking lot was quieter now. Somewhere in the distance a lawn mower hummed and then faded away. Ethan rested his forearms on his knees. You do not have to tell me if you do not want to. Claire gave a small smile that never fully reached her eyes. I think I do. She looked toward the maple tree. Whitmore Hospitality owns hotels, resorts, conference properties. My grandfather started with one roadside inn in Colorado 60 years ago. Ethan blinked once. Claire continued before he could answer. My father turned it into something much bigger. The evening air suddenly felt different. Ethan thought about the black vehicle, the tailored coat, the careful voices. None of it belonged to the woman who had carried moving boxes and argued about pancake shapes. And you? He asked quietly. Claire folded her hands together. I was supposed to take over. Ethan looked at her. Supposed to? She nodded. I left 6 months ago. Silence settled between them again. Not empty, just full of things neither knew how to hold. Why? Claire laughed softly, but there was sadness inside it. Because everyone knew my title and nobody knew me. Ethan lowered his eyes. He understood that feeling more than he wanted to admit. People saw the tired father, the repairman, the widower. Few ever asked what remained underneath. Claire stood slowly. I should go. Ethan did not stop her. He simply watched as she crossed the courtyard and disappeared into her apartment. That night dinner felt quieter. Lily pushed macaroni around her plate. Did Miss Claire do something wrong? Ethan looked up immediately. No, then why do you look sad? Children had a way of asking the questions adults spent years avoiding. Ethan forced a smile. I am not sad. Lily tilted her head. You use your quiet voice when you are. Ethan looked toward the empty chair beside the table, the one that still sat slightly farther back. The room felt smaller suddenly. Sometimes people belong to worlds bigger than ours, he said gently. Lily frowned. Bigger than apartments? Ethan almost smiled. Something like that. The next morning he left earlier than usual. Work orders filled the dashboard clipboard. Furnace inspection. Vent replacement. Emergency service call near the county line. He buried himself inside labor because labor was simple. Machines broke. You fixed them. Hearts were different. Hearts remembered. Around noon he stopped at a diner off Route 18. The television above the counter played muted business news. Ethan barely looked up until a familiar face appeared on the screen. Claire stood beside a gray-haired man in front of a hotel ribbon cutting. Elegant dress. Camera flashes. The headline below read, Whitmore heiress expected to return to leadership role. Ethan stared. The waitress refilled his coffee. Pretty lady, she said casually. Those hotel people own half the state, I swear. Ethan looked down at his worn work boots. Grease still marked one knee of his jeans. His hands carried old cuts from years of fixing things that belonged to everyone else. He thought about cinnamon coffee, paper stars, soup, rain. Somehow they now felt impossible. That evening Lily waited by the window. Is Miss Claire coming for dinner? Ethan set down his tool bag. Not tonight. Lily looked disappointed. Tomorrow. Ethan hesitated. Outside, across the courtyard, Claire stood beneath the maple tree, talking quietly on her phone. Another black vehicle waited nearby. He turned away before she could see him. I do not know, sweetheart. His voice came softer than he intended. I really do not know. 3 days passed without soup, without cinnamon coffee, without laughter drifting through open doors. Claire's apartment remained quiet. Some mornings the black vehicle appeared near the curb. Some nights lights stayed on past midnight behind her curtains. Ethan noticed every detail and pretended he did not. Work became longer. He accepted extra repair calls. A broken furnace 45 miles away. A restaurant freezer unit near the interstate. Anything that kept him moving. Motion was easier than missing someone. Lily noticed anyway. Children always did. On Thursday afternoon, she sat at the kitchen table with crayons spread around her like little islands of color. Ethan was replacing the loose hinge on a cabinet door when she spoke. Daddy. Yeah. You miss her. Ethan tightened the screw without looking up. Lily. You do. He stopped moving. Sunlight rested across the table. The music box sat near the window. The empty chair still waited where it always had. It is complicated, he said. Quietly. Lily folded her hands. Adults say that when they are sad. Ethan almost smiled despite himself. Later that evening, Lily disappeared into her room, carrying markers and construction paper. She emerged 20 minutes later holding a folded envelope decorated with tiny yellow stars. Can you take this to Miss Claire? Ethan looked up immediately. What is it? Lily hugged it to her chest. A secret. Lily. She grinned. A good secret. Before he could ask more, she slipped out the door and crossed the courtyard. Ethan watched from the window. Claire opened her apartment after the second knock. She looked tired. Her hair was pulled back loosely, and she still wore work clothes that belonged more in boardrooms than apartment hallways. Lily handed over the envelope with both hands. Claire knelt to her level. For me? Lily nodded. You have to read it alone. Claire smiled softly. That sounds serious. It is. Back inside her apartment, Claire sat by the window beneath the warm lamp that usually stayed off these days. She unfolded the paper slowly. Inside, written in uneven pencil letters, was one sentence. My dad still leaves one chair empty. Underneath it, Lily had drawn 3 stick figures beside a maple tree and one little star floating above them. Claire stared at the page. The room around her blurred quietly. Her fingers touched the paper star Lily had given her weeks earlier. It still rested on the shelf beside the books she never opened anymore. A knock came at her door less than an hour later. Claire wiped her eyes quickly before opening it. Ethan stood there holding a glass container. Lily made too much macaroni, he said. Claire looked at him. They both knew that was impossible. Ethan shifted awkwardly. She wanted to make sure you ate. Claire accepted the dish carefully. Thank you. Silence settled. Soft. Familiar. Ethan looked down at the envelope still resting in her hand. She wrote you something? Claire nodded. Yes. Should I be worried? A small laugh escaped her. The first real one in days. No, Ethan relaxed slightly. Evening wind moved through the courtyard. Somewhere a screen door closed. The maple leaves had begun turning gold. Now, Claire looked at him for a long moment. Ethan. He lifted his eyes. I did not leave because of who you are. He said nothing. I left because I was afraid of what staying meant. The air seemed to still around them. Ethan looked toward the dining table inside his apartment, where one chair still sat farther back than the others. Then he looked at Claire standing in the doorway holding a child's letter like it was something sacred. For the first time since learning her name, he stopped seeing the heiress. He saw the woman who had been running from loneliness too. Saturday arrived wrapped in golden light and cool air. The maple tree outside the apartments had finally turned, its leaves glowing amber against the blue sky like little pieces of autumn holding on. Ethan spent the morning fixing the loose shelf in Lily's room while she sat on the floor sorting colored paper into careful stacks. Every few minutes, she looked toward the window. Waiting for someone? Ethan asked. Lily pretended innocence. Maybe. Ethan smiled despite himself. He had not seen Claire in 2 days. No black vehicle either. Her apartment lights stayed off at night now. The silence across the courtyard had become its own kind of ache. Around noon, Ethan left for a quick repair call only 15 minutes away. A bakery freezer had stopped cooling. Simple job. He expected to be back before lunch. Instead, the old unit fought him for nearly 3 hours. By the time he returned, the sun had already started lowering behind the buildings. He climbed the stairs carrying his tool bag and a paper sack with cinnamon rolls for Lily. The hallway smelled faintly of detergent and fresh paint. Apartment 3C waited at the end like always. Quiet. Familiar. He reached for the handle. The door opened before he touched it. Claire stood there. Ethan stopped completely. She held a small wooden box against her chest. The paper star Lily had made was tucked carefully beneath the ribbon around it. Her eyes looked softer somehow. Lighter. I thought you were still gone, he said quietly. Claire gave a tiny smile. I thought so too. Ethan looked past her. Inside the apartment, Lily sat at the table pretending not to watch while very obviously watching everything. Daddy, she announced dramatically. Miss Claire brought dessert. Claire laughed under her breath. The sound felt like sunlight after rain. Ethan stepped inside slowly. The apartment carried the warm smell of baked apples again. The wooden box in Claire's hands rested on the table now. What is this? Ethan asked. Claire touched the lid gently. My grandfather built the first Whitmore Inn with this. She opened it. Inside lay an old brass room key attached to a worn leather tag. Number 7. He kept it his whole life, she said softly. When I was little, he told me something. Ethan listened. He said a place only becomes home when someone chooses to stay. The room fell quiet. Outside, leaves moved across the sidewalk in little circles. Somewhere children laughed near the parking lot. Claire looked directly at Ethan. I went back this week. Her fingers tightened around the key. Board meetings. Plans. Expectations. Ethan nodded slowly. And her eyes shined. I realized none of them felt like home. Lily stopped coloring. Even the crayons seemed still. Claire took a breath. I do not know what happens next. I do not know if I can balance both worlds. She looked toward the dining table. For chairs now. Lily had quietly pulled the empty one closer earlier that morning. But I know I do not want to keep running. Ethan followed her gaze. The chair that had remained distant for years no longer stood apart. He had not noticed when it moved. Lily suddenly raised her hand proudly. I did that. Claire smiled through eyes that looked suspiciously bright. Ethan stood there beneath the kitchen light, cinnamon rolls forgotten in his hand. The apartment was still small. The cabinets were still old. The future was still uncertain. But for the first time in years, the room no longer felt like something borrowed from survival. It felt like it was waiting for life. Autumn settled fully over the apartment complex the following week. The maple tree outside had turned completely gold now, its leaves drifting across the sidewalk like little pieces of sunlight learning how to let go. Ethan stood in the kitchen early Saturday morning stirring pancake batter while Lily arranged napkins with far more seriousness than any 8-year-old should have possessed. Blue one for you, she announced. Yellow one for me. She placed the last napkin carefully. And this one stays here. Ethan looked toward the fourth chair, the one that had once sat apart. It stood evenly beside the others now. Not forced, not symbolic, just present. A soft knock came at the door. Lily grinned before Ethan even moved. Claire stood outside holding a pie box tied with twine. She wore jeans, a cream sweater, and the paper star still rested inside her coat pocket. No black vehicle waited outside. No folders. No assistants. Only her. Apple pie? She asked quietly. Ethan stepped aside. Come in. Morning light spilled across the apartment floor as if it had been waiting too. Breakfast stretched longer than anyone planned. Pancakes became stories. Stories became laughter. Claire admitted she had burned toast 3 times trying to learn how to cook. Lily declared this heroic. Ethan laughed hard enough to lower his head into his coffee cup. The sound surprised even him. Later they walked outside beneath the maple tree carrying mugs of cider. Leaves drifted around their feet. Lily ran ahead collecting the brightest ones for a scrapbook project. Claire stood beside Ethan watching her. I made a decision, she said softly. Ethan looked over. About Whitmore? She nodded. I am going back. His expression changed only slightly, but she saw it. Not the way they wanted. She continued quickly. I am keeping the role. Smaller hours. Fewer appearances. I told them I want to rebuild the community properties. Small ends. Family spaces. Ethan stayed quiet. Claire smiled. My grandfather started with one place where travelers could rest and feel seen. She looked toward the apartments behind them. I think I forgot that for a while. Wind moved through the branches overhead. Golden leaves floated down around them. Ethan looked at her for a long moment. You found it again. Claire met his eyes. No, her voice became softer. I found it here. Across the yard, Lily suddenly ran back, carrying 4 leaves pressed carefully in her hands. One red, one orange, one gold, one still green. For us, she announced proudly. Ethan knelt. Us. Lily nodded with complete certainty. Families do not always start the same way. Silence followed. Quiet. Gentle. The kind that carries truth instead of emptiness. Claire looked down. Ethan reached out first. Not grandly. Not dramatically. He simply took one of the leaves from Lily and handed it to Claire. Their fingers brushed for only a second. The maple tree rustled overhead. Somewhere nearby, a wind chime sang. Back inside the apartment, the music box rested near the window. 4 chairs stood around the table. Sunlight touched each one equally. The empty space was gone now. Not because love had replaced what was lost, but because kindness had sat beside grief long enough to become something new. And sometimes that is how miracles arrive. Quietly. Through ordinary mornings. Through apple pie. Through a child who moves a chair. Through people brave enough to stay.